So guys, I know the background audio is a thing. Next time I'll make sure to let the guys. I'll put them in the naughty corner, like silence,
Ja,
silence
Nice.
them up.
dat je mij bent als allemaal.
So we're quickly gonna go into the gallery. Let me see if it works. So bear with me, guys.
Okay.
There we go. So we're gonna quickly go through all the entries, and we are gonna start with one which we're gonna look at. But as Jay knows, this one's made by Danny, and it's not eligible to get a vote. So I think that's something that we
Oh,
need
this
to
was
keep.
Dan. Oh yeah,
This
it's got
was
the name at the
Danny's,
bottom.
yeah. So while it's, we're just gonna show it off because he did have like an epic time painting this model or in his Hong Kong apartment while
It
he
shows. Yeah.
like locked up and can't go out. So he put some real effort into this one. So that's kind of cool.
I think you can't hear Jay now. I just.
Oh, did you?
It's because he has
I'm
like the
I'm still
audio
here.
has to come from the Discord. I just.
No, but desktop audio is still on here, so it should be okay.
Oh
Can
yeah.
you guys still hear Jay? Just to make sure.
I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Can you still hear the Mohawk? That's important.
If that's okay, I just bring. Then I just
An
bring
ass
for it.
tree. And just otherwise, I'm just gonna put in one
Excellent.
here. Oh yeah, you're still here. I
Yeah.
can hear you on my.
Yeah, we're good.
We're
We're
good.
good.
So we're quickly going to go through the entries. So I'm going to ask Jay to give some of his feedback. He took a look at all the pictures before the stream. So I think he has a pretty good idea of that.
Good luck.
And he took some like close-up views of everything to give a, like a general edition of idea. Sorry, of the level of painting, the techniques used, and to see if he has some suggestions to improve and general commentary. Yes. So let's just start off easily with one of the guys. So you can rip on this picture as much as you want. Then he will probably listen to this tomorrow morning, at least for him. So we can go balls to the walls here. So
Awesome.
yeah, what's your general consensus? Like when you look at the picture, what's your first impression? Let's start with
So
that.
Danny, I just want to start off by saying I really like you. And I hope we can remain friends. All right. You've done a great job. Like, honest to God, you have done a fantastic job out of this. Your color palette choices have been pretty spot on. You've got a very sort of not quite desaturated, but kind of coldish view of green for the armor, and then you've contrasted that with nice bright reds for the plasma gun. You've got some really nice warm bone tones in the horns and things like that. So you've used a lot of different colors in a lot of different ways to help bring this model to life all around. It helps make sure the viewer, when they're looking at the Mini, wants to explore every kind of nook and cranny that you've got there and seek the extra bits of detail.
Exactly.
So I really like that. That's fantastic. Big fan of the green color that you've got as well. You've got some very smooth blends on things like the helmet. You can see it on the backpack, the shoulder pad with the not the Nurgling. Really, really good. Love that a lot. Things that you could maybe improve.
Yeah, it's a very different painting style. I think when you look at most of the Death Guard models, like we're used to looking at that like that flat green, right? The Nurgle
Yeah,
block
that's
green.
right. They end up very drab quite often,
Exactly,
don't
yeah.
they? Kind of, you get something that's in the background and you get a few bits in the foreground, which are usually the things that are around it, like tentacles and so on. But then he's made a really good feature out of the armor, which is great because on the Space Marine, anything with power armor, you've got probably 90% of the Mini that's covered in that. And so the fact that he's gone absolutely balls to the wall with it is brilliant.
Yeah, I think he was really like we've been seeing most of the work in progress pictures in our Discord server with the fellow Patreons, and
Nice.
this was one of those minis where everyone like if you see like some of the earlier work in progress, you're like, okay, this is yellow, it's really yellow. Because when this paint scheme starts out, it's like when the first time I've seen you paint like bright red and you started with bright green, it was like, where is this going?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
This paint scheme is quite similar because he paints really bright and then tones it down, which we usually see with most Death Guard armies, right? People start out with orange, but then we start out with the pale green and then it gets blended down even more. And I think because he started so bright, it actually still has a lot of like good contrast when you look at it from a distance.
Yeah, exactly. There's loads of vibrancy left in it.
Exactly, yeah. It kind of reminded me of the Nurgle Demon army you painted. I think it's a couple of weeks back
Oh
now.
yeah.
Where you
Yeah,
also
yeah, that
started
was
out
last
with the
month.
really bright colors. Like your airbrush work was quite vibrant as well. And then with oil washing, toning it down as well. So pretty good. Hey Daniel, no you're not too late, man. You haven't come up yet. So Cajun Ranger in the Twitch chat is actually Daniel, one of the other guys in the competition. So everyone's eagerly awaiting their turn, so that's good. So do you have any tips for Danny when you look at this mini? Like anything you go like, that's something
Yeah,
or an area or a technique I would improve upon for the next time.
There's one thing that springs to mind pretty immediately, and
Ik heb gewoon te weinig model, echt waar.
I see this a lot on anyone that tries to apply any kind of verdigris or weathering to a miniature.
Want ik kan dat ding niet.
The usual technique that I see a lot of people using is they go to Games Workshop, they pick up a pot of that like lilac oxide paint, and then they sort of splat it on here and there. And the whole of this model has been given the right care and attention when it comes to highlights and shadows and making sure there's a transition. But if you look at the bell, which is a main feature of the mini, because it's one of the most sort of topmost parts of the model,
Yeah, and iconic
you've got
as
this
well.
really nice dark metallic, and then you've just got some splodges of this sort of lilac oxide turquoise. When you're using stuff like that, you need to find a way to introduce it into the mini. So if you look at physical examples of oxidization on bronze or copper, which is what this would be, you'll see it in certain areas. You'll see it has a point where it introduces itself gradually and then builds up a patina. And having just a few splodges of it here and there, I think, really detracts from it. What he could have done is once he'd applied those, we could have mixed up his own mix of like turquoises and off-whites and things like that to get a similar color. You could have then gone over it a few times with a wash or a glaze to help bring that in the same way he's done the armor, where he started off really bright and then darkened it down. You do exactly the same thing here.
Yeah, so blend it in more into the metal so that transition looks more natural, right? If you
That's
like
right,
like you discussed, like the splotches or the general oxidation areas are a bit too spot heavy in that sense. And
That's right.
The transition could have really helped like nail this.
Ja, dat is wel een interessant boekje. Dan gaan we het denk maar zien.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well thanks for that. I think Daniel will be very happy with this feedback.
Give him a solid thumbs up on this though. This is really good.
Cool. We're going to go to the next entry. So let me see if that works. So let's go the other way. Go this way. Yeah, there we go. You see? Yeah. So this is a Necron Cryptek painted by one of the guys actually in the chat, Mr. Brutal. So Melvin, say hello to Jay. Jay, this is Melvin.
Hey, how's it going, Melvin?
He's a very addicted Mohawk miniature streamer by now. I think we mentioned your name once when he was starting out in the hobby, and he was like, okay, I need to watch this guy, and I think he's seen most of your streams.
Yeah, he's here a lot. It's really good. It's really encouraging as well.
Yeah, and he's like, that's where you can really see when you have a group of people surrounding you, and it's both in the Patreon but also in your Twitch stream, for example. Everyone's always super supportive, helpful, which is, let's be honest, is rare in the internet sometimes. So let's do the same system. So first impression. What catches your eye?
I really like the color scheme that you've gone for. You've got that kind of ghost face sort of Necron thing going on, where you've got very dark armor all over, but then you've got this bright white face mask. And I really like that. On a lot of minis, you tend to pick 2 or 3 focal points that you want the people are looking at your miniature to look at more than any other part on the mini. And for something like this, from the front, you'd be looking at the weapon, the spider, and the face. You need to find a way of drawing the attention to that. And by having the face in a completely different color to anything else that's on the mini, you accomplish that very, very easily. And once you've applied that over a lot of minis, so let's say you did an army where everyone had that white face, with that ghost face Necron look, it would be really, really striking and give them a very sinister kind of appeal from the other side of the table. So that's my absolute first, like, most favorite thing on this, 100%.
Cool. So I think that's one of the things that struck me first as well, especially also the house. The housing of the like the scepter or the scythe, I think. I think it's the saffron light officially.
Yeah, I
like
think
the
so.
really bright greens, like the high contrast between like the really high, like almost sick green highlighting, and then the really dark green as well. Like the good contrast draws your attention, at least for me as well, and then the face is like a close second for me as well, because of all this, like the pure white really popping in. Seeing that there, yeah, that's the point of doing this, Ricardo. Like we need to get quality tips so we can apply it to all of these, not just these. So, looking at this miniature, what do you think of like the color? Like you discussed the color palette. Do you think the mini is balanced? Looking at it, is it too much in one area or too little in another? Like, is the general layer, like general level of applying detail and the likes, is it good enough, or would you suggest a
No, I
different
like it. I think it's good because you've got a lot of flat panel areas which, unless you're really going ham on something, are always going to look just a little bit dull. So by leaving those in that dark color and then accentuating other parts of the mini where you've got the glowing vents on the chest, where you've got all of the bits and pieces around the cryptic itself, I think that's fine because all of those elements serve to just let your eye wander over the miniature. They don't detract from its sort of main core. The one thing I would possibly suggest is making this a little bit more difficult is photographing miniatures is extremely difficult, and it looks like it's been taken in just a little bit too low of a light because you can't quite see some of the things on the spider. I've spent a lot of time and a lot of, unfortunately, money making sure I have a light box set up that I can use and that will give me perfect pictures every time. And most people won't have that. But I think what we've definitely got here, though, is all of the areas on the miniature that we should be able to see and that should draw our eye to have definitely done that.
So that's for the people watching and Melvin as well in our chat. Melvin, it might be cool for you to mention how long have you been painting? Like how many minis have you painted before this one? Because
I know the answer to that, Smile,
I'm
like
curious.
everybody
Yeah, in the chat you can have a guess. So how many minis did he paint before he painted this one? Because I know the answer and the number will probably surprise you. So I don't know if Melvin's still here, but Melvin, how many models did you paint before this one?
Dit zijn de 6 Heavy Bolters.
Yep.
En dit
So
zijn
he
de
has
There you go.
3. Yeah,
normaal
pretty good.
Bolters.
3 minis, man.
Met
Yeah,
hier
so
in
this is pretty crazy, right? So I think he painted, I think, a few warriors and one immortal before this one.
Ja.
I think it's like one warrior. So one speed test on warrior, and then like a buff speed test as well on the immortal, and then this one.
Eerste
So
ronde. Nee, je bent
pretty crazy. This guy hasn't painted that much minis, and then this is like, and of course, this is what you can do if you put some time. You can really knuckle down, and
Yeah.
really like try, right? Had a quick
There are a
yeah.
huge variety, array, amount of resources out there for anyone who wants to get into miniature painting. Obviously, I stream, but I am one of like several hundred people that stream on Twitch. I'm one of several thousand people that upload videos to YouTube, and maybe even several million people
By now,
that upload any kind of like art resource, whether it's miniature painting, traditional painting, sculpting, whatever your chosen expression of art may be. There are a lot of people that do this kind of thing. So there's resource out there for anyone to go to pick up hints and tips or stuff. Whether it's just something as simple as how do I base coat my minis, all the way up to how do I do freehand, how to do blended zenithal highlights and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot out there, and he's clearly done his homework a little bit as well.
He's already been giving me tips. Like I've been in this hobby for I think close to 13 years, and he's already given me tips on painting. So that's
There you
like,
go, man.
that's how fast it can go, right? And that's like what you can get if you really knuckle down. So thanks, Melvin. I hope you're happy with the feedback, and I think there's some areas that are ripe for
Yeah.
improvement in technique. But that's also
I've got
yeah.
I've got one thing I'd suggest as a bit of feedback, and it's not something you can see on the sort of main picture itself. If you look towards the bottom right, you get a shot of the back of the Mini, and you could do with a lot more contrast in there. So something to break up those armor scales. And I can see there's been a little bit of a wash put in that area, but all of the scales kind of flow into each other. And if you just applied a little bit of a wash or a couple of glazes in between each one of the scales that come down that cloak, you know, with a bit more separation. By building that separation, building that contrast, it makes the whole part of him look a bit more eye-catching. Because his back is essentially just that, and then the big shield thing that he's got going on, it really does need it.
Yeah, so the metallic contrast there, like in the scales, yeah, was like cloak-ish thing.
Mhm. Just some sort of reddish brown wash. You could use like a flesh shade. You could make up your own washes, obviously, and just build something in there to help give each one of those separate cells that make up that sort of chain link cloak its own special thing.
Cool.
I think that's a really good pointer, and it will, like it really, it's a technique like we've all watched before, right? Like, but generally when people watch, it's like, okay, cool, one big thaw of wash and just spread it around a little bit. But like you discussed, layering a wash and actually creating like specific depth, now it's almost like line washing, is something that a lot of people underestimate how effective it can be. Of course, it's a bit more time consuming, but the added depth it can give without making it full black, which is like the black painting technique most people use, especially like 10 years back. Most people, like the only way to get like good contrast would just go like full black in the creases and recesses, and then blend up from there. But now with all the technical things that are out there, there's way more opportunity there to be a bit more subtle about it. I think this Mini could really use that a little bit more contrast, but subtly. Like the base is really good, at least in my opinion. And here, listening to you, Jay, I think we're both quite satisfied with the level that's been achieved already. And it's just those small things that can make it that much better. So,
Absolutely.
Melvin, good luck with that. I'll see you at my desk in a few nights, and we can get this done. And get even more mini painted up to this quality, of course. Like you can't go back from this now, right? Like every model has to be this cool now. Cool. So we'll go to the next one. So we got Helena. Helena is one of the minis from, I believe, Sergeant Steel, who's also in the chat with us. Sergeant Steel is primarily an Astra Militarum player or a guard player. Let's be fair, that's how we all remember it fondly as well. And he's actually foraying into systems of battle recently, and he's really been enjoying painting different armies and a very different color scheme as well. So Jay, let's go first impressions again. So what's the first thing that pops up to you?
So everything here is in that almost kind of grimdark style. That could just be the photography, I admit, but everything here is very muted. It's very dark, certainly on my screen at least. And my favourite thing about this Mini is I love painting yellow because there are a couple of sort of secret tips and tricks to painting yellow that make painting yellow really, really easy. And once you learn those, then yellow becomes your friend. And most people are scared of it, so you don't see many yellow miniatures on the tabletop. So seeing bright yellow Citadel of Battle, I think is fantastic to begin with. So fair play to you. You've absolutely gone out on a limb on that one, and you've given us something that is very distinctive and very unique, and I love that about it.
Thanks. So one of the things that, especially for me, that popped out is the scene that's being made. Like the basing, it almost looked like the Orc got slapped with a book. Like a Catholic schoolboy who didn't do his homework.
I think that's the teacher part of you coming out, TJ.
Yeah, I think that's it too. I'm reading into this a bit too much, maybe.
I think people in your class need to learn to duck. That's all.
Yeah,
just in case.
That's their first rule, right? First rule of Fight Club is not talk about Fight Club. But looking at the general scene, I really like the layout of the Mini, the contrast between the really bright, like the bright yellow, and then the darker green and the more muted tones in the base as well. That for me was something that I really liked. So if we go into the technical part of the Mini, you discussed that it looks quite muted. Is that something that you would change on this Mini? Is it something that you go even further in, for example, like
Necessarily
over?
change. It's not necessarily my style. Everything I paint is in a very bright comic book way, but that's just because that's how I paint. It's not because it's necessarily the best way or a good way to paint. It's just how I paint. I really like the fact that you can, while still being a bright color, isn't like I can't see yellow to be non-PC. You know, you can look at these without having to wear a pair of Ray-Bans or something. You're absolutely fine with it. The general composition of the Mini is good because something that I talk about a lot on my stream is making sure that anything that goes on the base of the miniature looks like it belongs there. Quite frequently, you see things that have been glued onto bases, but they're not part of the scene. They're just placed there. What you've got here with the orc, the sister is looking directly at the orc. You can tell all the of the scene in, and because of that, the orc looks like it belongs in that spot. So that is really, really good. One thing that I never really like seeing on miniatures is blood splatter because it's very frequently done extremely badly. However, in this case, you've kept it relatively subtle. There's no really large drops of it, which, if you think about the scale of the miniature and how big, if you scaled her up, actual size, some of those drops of blood would be, they're about the right size. You know, she shouldn't be covered in blood like she's come out of Bates Motel or something. So you've done a good job with that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I struggled with when I painted blood on one of, I think it was when I did my grotesque and racks for the guard army, I diluted my red like with a little bit of soap in it to just break the surface tension of the water to make the droplets smaller, and then use like a very fine brush and then just dip a little bit and then use the just pull your finger over it, or using the airbrush and blow over the bristles a little bit. But then you have to be really careful, like you said, like the scale also blood splatter should be in like proper proportion to the Mini, and that's always something that's really hard to do. Like it's usually easier on nice because then it already looks a bit better because of the general skill of the Mini, of course. But on like the regular energy size models, like you said, it can be overdone really quickly. Almost, like you said, this is quite subtle, especially considering the size of the Mini, which is like the fine detail in there, especially sisters. They're really like almost overly detailed if you look at them at scale, right?
Yeah, there's a lot going on with them, and they're deceptively slim. They're not necessarily short because they're actually relatively tall minis. They're about the same height as a Space Marine, but they don't have the width that a Marine would normally have, and so you've got to pack in the same amount of detail into a thinner space, which is tricky. So you've done a good job of that, mate. Like, honestly, I think you've done very well here. Congratulations.
Yeah, it reminds me of I've painted a couple of Infinity models in the past, and it's almost that type of proportions, right? So the limbs are way skinnier than you're used to. If you're used to like painting like Marine shin guards, for example, they look like a football field compared to these small
they really
small
do.
ankles.
And the thing with like Infinity as well is they're brilliant miniatures because you, the artist, is the person responsible for creating the detail on the Mini. They're very flat. They don't have a lot of sculpted detail and sort of molded detail, and you have to be the one to bring those to life. So if you guys are out there looking for a challenge, pick up some Infinity Minis and give them a go, because that will push you in a very different way to a Games Workshop miniature.
Yeah, applying those techniques back onto 40k miniatures will really add that like additional level of like contrast and depth to your minis. So generally like super positive. I really like the model. Is there any like things you would do differently, or any suggestions you would like to give, Ricardo?
Yeah, I'm trying to work out if this is the case or not, but forgive me if I've got this wrong. I think you're in the chat, Sarge. Is the orc skin, has that been painted with contrast paint? Or is that something that's been very heavily washed over? Because You've got, we've explained, we've talked about this before, like the focal points that you've got on a miniature. On this miniature, it's quite clearly her armor is one of them because it's one of the brightest things that are there. She's got a open helmet faced, so she's got hair, she's got a face. That's going to be another focal point, which means the third one is going to be that orc, because that's another large detail on the miniature.
And color
So,
detail as well. Yeah.
Because of that, these are the three things you need to put the most effort into. And contrast paint is a very quick way of producing something that can go out on a battlefield. And there's some things that even I use it for in commissions.
Yeah.
But
It has
they
its
are
uses, right?
the
Yeah.
base coat that gets blended up and turns into something else. And I think you could have done a lot more with the skin, because orc skin's a lot of fun to paint. You've got these gargantuan, over-exaggerated muscle groups. You can get some striations going on there. You've got loads of room for shadows, details, even things like tattoos and stuff like that if you really want to as well, because of the proportion that they're in. And I think you probably could have done with putting a bit more time into that, just because it's a large focal point on the miniature.
I think that's like a fair critique. And also for me, looking at the picture, while I do know the face is quite dark, and that's also by intent, like it's more of a dark tone skin tone. It might be the picture, and I suspect as well, like we discussed earlier, is making a good picture is already like almost a mission on its own.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think-
getting the lighting stuff.
I think as well. I think that's one of the main things as well here. Like the dark face, like painting a darker face. What we generally tend to do is go for really deep, like brown tones, black tones. But what we do tend to forget in general, and you see it a lot in salamander skin as well, is that people forget to then highlight it back up to like a more natural brown, like a more more skin tone
Yeah,
brown.
definitely.
We tend to linger in like the darker leather tones, which of course are the paints that we're familiar with as well, I think. But I think here the face as well could have really benefited from an additional layering of more detail, especially like the pronounced details, like the cheekbones, nose, chin,
That's right.
and just to bring out a bit
Something
more
that will something that will really help in that kind of situation, and I strongly suggest people do this, is to get some reference material. Now, the worst thing you can do when it comes to reference material is go and pick up somebody else's picture of a miniature. So don't go to Instagram and look through like Sisters of Battle, for instance, and go, right, here's what I want to paint. I want to paint a face like this person's painted that face, because you're playing like Chinese whispers but with images. Instead, go and find a real picture of a real person and use that as your reference material. So if you're painting somebody with dark skin, look through like IMDb or something for some Hollywood actresses, because their features, especially in movies, are often ever so slightly over-exaggerated, which you're going to need to do because the scale of the miniature, this mini is what, an inch and a half tall. We haven't got enough room to have these extremely natural skin tones that also have blemishes in the skin and things like that. So look for films, like music videos, things like that, to get yourself some inspiration for how to paint a face, and then copy that picture onto your miniature rather than somebody else's miniature onto your miniature.
I think that's an extremely good tip. And I guess where we tend to look for references in fellow painters, but if they're not doing exactly what you want to do, it's never going to fully connect with your vision of the mini, right? And I think using that, we do the same thing for most of our terrain as well. We tend to go out and look for like pictures of weathered buildings, and okay, how does rust form? Is rust, what we tend to do is we think, okay, the water comes from the top, so the rust should be the top. But what tends to happen is rust tends to originate from areas that are actually underneath, like where you would normally paint shadow. That's where the rust would start.
Okay.
Little
Because
things
the
like
water's
that.
not evaporating from that area, it's building up an
Yeah.
accumulation of bacteria which helps erode the metal and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the origin, so the brightest orange is usually the newest orange, so you can put that more to the top if you have like a gradient or like a cylinder shape, for example. But like the really dark rust should always be at the bottom, and what we tend to see is people actually reversing that. That makes terrain look off. Like that, your mind's eye tends to like tries to find like the similarities between the picture of the train piece and then the real world reference you have just from experience. And then if it misaligns, it just throws you off. And
That's right.
I think that's
It-
where
everything we do as miniature painters is an optical illusion,
exactly.
because whilst there's highlights on this mini, those are not highlights that have been caused by natural light hitting that piece of armor that happens to be glossy enough to create a highlight that looks like that. This is something that we have painted to fool our audience into thinking that this is in, say, an open field and it's got a nice sunlight above it and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
We have to create all of those thoughts and feelings in our miniatures by fooling our audience into thinking that. So we've got to make it very reminiscent of what they would otherwise normally see. So faces, for instance, most people spend their entire life looking at somebody in the face several times a day. It's very easy to see if there's something that's not quite right just because of that. It's bred into us as sort of a societal behaviorism.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we tend to forget when we're painting minis. Like we sometimes we gloss over stuff like that, and it's always good to keep that in mind. Like we're trying to simulate something that isn't there, but we want to make sure that it looks like it's there. And
Yeah,
that will mean
exactly
that sometimes minis you have to put in a little bit extra to make that happen. Okay, so we're gonna go from a very grimdark, really cool sister. Thanks, Sarge, for the entry. We really liked it. As you can hear from our descriptions, like there's some areas you could improve on, but like the general style and just feel of the mini is really cool. We're gonna go into something really bright, and we're gonna go into a Harlequin Troopmaster. This one is painted by Oli Wissel, or Olinator as we know him. He's quite famous for being really good at rolling invulnerable saves, which might explain. Hey, I don't see the gallery switching over.
Brilliant. Famous for making his invulnerable saves. He plays Harlequins. I mean, that's you need that as a Harlequin player. That's a good thing.
Exactly. Like it's really like for him, it's one of those things that just happens. Like he's like super famous for being really good at rolling 5-up saves for his demons.
Damn.
And now he switched over to Harlequins, which actually have a 3-up invulnerable save if you do it well. So it's probably only going to get better. So there we have the picture. So as you can see, it's a very different style of mini.
Yes.
It's super bright and really high contrast in colors. Like most of the color wheel is in there in some part of the mini. So let's do first impressions, Jay. What strikes you when you look at this?
So initially, there's something about this model's haircut that I really find appeals to me, and I can't work out why.
Yeah, it's that kind of like familiarity you only have with something you have. Right?
Yeah, a kindred spirit, but
Oh,
this one's
that's it,
clearly a little
yeah.
bit more athletic than I am. So I really like just how much this mini works. So normally when you apply a lot of different colors to something, you create this sort of garish mess that your brain can't really decode from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sort of looking at it and you've got like a green off to one side and the purple off to another one, and then this bright orange somewhere else, and they clash everywhere, and it's difficult to see the detail. But what we've got here is the opposite of that. You've got all of these colors, but because predominantly we're working with a purple, a blue, and an orange, which is a 3-pointed sort of match on the color wheel, then it just works. And the other colors that you've added in here as little accents, like that little bit of yellow here and there, just really help to just bring out some extra details on the miniature, while the rest of it still remains quite cohesive. So I'm a big fan of that.
Cool. Yeah, it's one of those things. When I look at the mini, like when we discussed this at the painting competition at the major last year, November, and also we discussed in the previous entry. Like one of the things that struck me to this mini, like the mini itself is like super vibrant and colorful and really detailed. This is like the freehanding. It's some of his better work. Like he's been really working on trying to get those damn patterns on
Them diamonds,
Harlequin.
man.
Oh,
They're
diamonds.
tough.
It's, whew. I've
Harlequin Motley. It's
yeah,
rough.
exactly. And then if you look from the Mini down, like we've discussed, like a base shouldn't withdraw intention from the Mini. But I think here a little bit more detail would have really helped solidify the scene of the Mini. Like the base, while it's effective, it kind of instead of lifting the Mini up, it kind of actually flattens it a bit. At least in my perspective, looking at it.
I think you're right, and it's an area on the miniature that frequently gets given like a bare minimum effort. Like, I've painted the Mini, I just got to do this thing at the bottom that I don't really care about too much. And I'm not saying that's what the artist has done here, but we talked earlier on about making sure that everything that's on a base feels like it has a sensation of belonging to that base. It's there for a reason. And what we've got here, which is somewhat endemic of all of the Harlequin minis, is you have a miniature that is posed on top of a thing, which is then glued to a flat plastic disc. Now, the artist, to his credit, has tried to sort of bed that in using the sort of textured paint that he's got going on the base. It comes up to the sides of it, and it gives it that impression of being sunk in a little. But there could have been a lot more done to make it feel like it was part of the scene. You could have taken maybe some weathering pigments. They're perfect for stuff like this. And just built up a little bit of a layer of dust up that little bit of wraith bone to help sort of tie it in. You could have added in a couple of small like clippings from some tufts of grass around the outside of it a little bit to make it look like they've been sheltered from the weather at that point. And it's allowed a little plant to grow. There's lots of things that could have been done there. And I think it's only really a bit of an issue because the rest of the model has such care and attention put into the freehand and into the bright and vibrant colours of it, that the base, because it is essentially quite flat in terms of its colour palette, it does let the miniature down a little bit. And it's a shame because everything else has been done really, really well.
Yeah, like if you look at, like you discussed already with the triangle, the colour wheel, the orange, the blue and the purple, and already applying a technique like that and being aware of what contrasts well, and especially when you like, it's easy to contrast a two-tone, right? It's basically most of us would go to the opposite side of the color wheel and go like, oh cool, those are contrasts because they're opposites. But making that work for three colors and being aware that you need a triangle, which is some, like I've seen people do like opposite color and then one to like the corner to the left or the right, and then it looks totally off. So spreading that contrast out evenly, literally evenly, is really effective, and it really makes sure that the Mini as a whole is very cohesive. So really good job.
I really like it. As with almost everything we've seen, is a little bit to work on here and there. But you're definitely making the right moves, man. Everything is looking pretty good.
Pretty crisp. Cool. Do you have any last like general suggestion or tip? Like we discussed the base. Like briefly.
Just a small one. Yeah. I've already. What to do is a very symmetrical, very clean, clinical almost geometric pattern. In this case, you've gone with those diamonds on the back, and the first step to doing any of that is to very, very thinly mark out your pattern using usually a color that's close enough to the background that if you make a mistake, you can go over it.
Yeah,
and
so
if we look at the
you've
got here, for example, the cloak, some of your black lines are quite thick in comparison to others. So it's just something to work on. It's difficult, it's very tricky. You're doing something that's 2D art on a 3D surface. We all know how hard that is, and we can all appreciate how hard you've worked to get this done. But it's just one of those things. You just need to refine that a little bit more and it'll be perfect.
I think one of the things as a hardcore player, like I stay far away from this mod league because I really don't have the patience for this. But one of the things you see a lot in that group in general, because it's quite familiar to have a paint scheme like this for hardcore. So we do see a lot of people just practicing this on like curved pieces of green stuff or some plastic art that's been shaped using heat. And just practicing getting that pattern down on a curved surface, because there's so much going on there in terms of geometry. Making that look natural is really difficult. And I think it came really close, and like you said, it's more like technical improvements. just that come from a lot of basically a lot of practice. And I think
That's right.
he's probably going to get there. I know he's still got loads of troops to paint, so probably by the time he's
Nice.
done, he's going to make a new troop master and make it look even better. So alright, thanks dude for your entry, and we're going to go to the last one. This one I believe is from KJ Ranger, Daniel, which is Igona, or I don't know how you want me to pronounce this, which is a Elder Warlock. Bit more of a scenic step as well. So Jay, again, first impressions.
So, the first time I saw this, I actually made a little vocal exclamation, just a little bit like, "Ooh, hello," because it's very impressive. You've got something here that every part of the mini has been considered. You've got a base that is a nice scenic base that's been made. Looks like from scratch. I think I can see some layers of cork going on for that. You've got a miniature that is placed correctly on the base. It's very centered. The stance is absolutely spot on. Now, this is an old metal miniature that I had. I don't want to tell you guys how long ago, but it was many years ago. And it's always been one of my favourite of the Eldar range. So a little bit of me liking it so much is that little sort of nostalgia sense. But it's very imposing. You've got these lovely dark colours, very much like the Necron Cryptek we saw earlier on, that surround this nice bright white face. And it centres your attention firmly and doesn't let go until you've examined every detail of that little face mask. And I love stuff like that in a miniature.
Cool. You're fucking old, yeah. I know Daniel, you're one of the oldest guys in the group, which is okay. But yeah, we like this was one of the first like real, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel. One of the first like real like centerpiece models you painted. Like really taking your time and really putting all the effort. Like his general army, he's usually a guard player as well, but like he has loads of detail in his HQs as well. But this to me at least looks like a new level for him as well. Like looking at his generals work, and like looking at all the work in progress pictures, and he posted a lot of them. He put a lot of like attention to, like you discussed, like the face is super iconic for this model. Like in general, it's really iconic for the Warlock model, like the mask, like the helmet. But it pops out so well. And then using the really bright white and the really dark purple. Also, purple of the helmet is like slightly darker than the purple. There's even more depth in that perspective.
That's one thing I really like. It's very easy to take some contrasting colours by just grabbing a colour wheel and going like, this is obviously this, or paint this colour. It's much harder to paint a miniature in colours that are all part of the same area of the spectrum, but all have their own individual personality. So that helmet being purple rather than the ever so slight kind of magenta that we've got on the robes here, mean that you've got something that definitely has taken some thought and some skill, because you've got two colours that are basically the same, that have had a slightly different treatment applied to them to give two different results.
And that's like one of the easiest things to forget, and we see this a lot with most of the miniature painters out there, is that you tend to see like, okay, we do some airbrush work. For example, you take like your Custodes or Primaris Marine, and you set up the base tone with your airbrush, you have a nice transition, and then what happens is everything looks the same. Like every part, even though it's different materials, will have the same color saturation, the same transition. And what's really striking here, and like you discussed, is very subtle, at least from what I could tell by the pictures, and I'm looking forward to seeing this miniature in real life at some point. Is the very subtle transition in the cloak, and then the quite dark helmet, which are all in the same color tone, but just by using the different techniques, it looks like a different material, and that's one of the
No,
hardest
looks like
things, at
this
least
is
I found in miniature painting, is using
nee, en
the same
één
colors
voor,
effectively,
deze drie,
and then by
die
just
ook
different
wel trouwens.
applications, you make it look like a
Zesje,
different
de
material.
Eagle,
Like we've all seen non-metallic metal painters and people
je
using
krijgt
similar techniques, but actually taking a hard material, for example the Wavebone helmet in this case, and then the softer cloth,
dat ik er twee
and
heb.
staying away from really hard edge highlights, which is
Krijg je dus
like I think one of the main
en op
steps
die
for
ook nog
painting
gaat
cloth
gebeuren,
is
maar dan zou
going
ik
like
dus-
really
ja,
hard
dat
and
doe ik niet.
really
Daarom is-
sharp
Daarom
on
is het
certain
lekker-
details would actually take away from the
Wel,
softness of
wat ik
the,
bedoel,
of the
dat je
material.
elke beurt
I
kan
think that was done really well here.
Ja, maar je kan
Like,
dus elke beurt zeggen. Ik
looking
weet
at
ik
the different
weet dat jij
materials,
gaat
like
scoren.
the pouch it looks visually different. Then he has the true metallics, which are quite nicely done and look a bit weathered, which really give a nice contrasting color to the general use. I think. Just like the general feel is really cool, at least in my perspective. And when we were talking when no one could hear us, we had a small discussion about the entries as well. And then just having that initial reaction is that's quite striking as well, I think. So looking at the technical execution, are there any areas where you go like, well, this is good, but you could improve by doing X, for example, like a different technique, or different color choice, for example, or different method of painting?
So, because this has been executed so well, I'm going to be really picky with my feedback. Because you've clearly got a lot of skill. You can obviously use a brush very, very well. You've got very fine brush control. And there are elements of the miniature here we're looking at that clearly show that. So, on the, we'll start with the base. You've got these blue sort of lines of power coming out of the sword, and that is a brilliant, brilliant idea, and I love it. However, some of the blends that you've done there, and then also on the sword itself, could be a little bit more fluid. So if we look at the sort of power lines on the floor, you've got these sort of specular highlights. So specular highlight is basically like a dot, like a glint on something. You've got these little bits of white specular highlights going on through the rest of the blue. But what you could have done, I think, is put those in there, applied a blue wash over the top of it. So just take some of the blue that you've used for the rest of the line, thin that right down a little bit, maybe using some medium or just water, your choice. Get that put back in there so it glazes the white into blue, and then put an even smaller dot of white into those areas, because that will give you that transition through it. You'll still get that kind of lightning arcing sort of power and so on, but it would just look a little bit less manufactured, a bit more natural. And if we take that same lesson and move up the mini onto the sword, you've done a beautiful job there of getting that sort of three elements to each side of the blade, with the light and the dark. I love seeing power swords done like this. It's one of my favourite things to do, is just to sit down, chill out, and paint for about an hour and a half or so to get one of these swords done. But by the time you finish, your blends should be flawless. You should have one colour that seamlessly blends into another one. And what you've got here is you can see some of the step changes in the colours that you've used. So you've got white, and then you've got an immediate sort of lighter, sort of pale blue, and then you've got a slightly more royal blue, and then you've got a dark blue. And unfortunately, it's quite easy to see those. So something you could do is just keep working your glazes. Go backwards and forwards with them. So for anyone that's listening, you don't have to just put paint on once and call it done, right? You can paint over something, and putting a blue glaze over white would look a lot different to putting a white glaze over a blue, because of the filter that you're applying, that the top color gives you the most impact. So just a back and forth process on that blade to smooth that would have been taking this mini from where it is now, and it's very, very good, to making it perfect. And then the only thing I've got left to say there is you've got these wonderful color choices that you've made. You've got a purple warlock with a gold chess piece and a green gem because you've got something that stands out away from the rest of it. But you've then got this small gem next to a very big, thick purple sleeve on a blue sword. And I probably would have gone for an orange gem at that point or something else ever so slightly different, just to make that element stand out a little bit.
So you have a bit
But
more
that's me
like a
being
hot
picky.
cold contrast, like you discussed. I think quite extensively in some of your streams, where you go from a really hot to a really cold color. So you have the really pale blue, and then you put in the warmer orange. So the color contrast by intent is already
That's right.
more of a change. I guess. Yeah, that's a really nice addition. I hope then you can work with us. So I expect even better commanders, tanks, and stuff in the future. Because now this is the bar you have to live up to. Thanks for putting it down for yourself.
No going back from there.
Exactly.
Always forward, right?
Cool. That's the entries we've been given. So I have to ask you formally who would you like to vote for. I think I can have a guess, but I have to ask you publicly which miniature gets your vote.
It is. There's some fantastic stuff here. I don't want to put anybody in like a little bit of a sort of more mood or anything, but it's definitely this: the composition of the miniature, the thought that's gone into it, the care that's gone into the basing, into the color selection, into the blends that we've seen here. This is absolutely my favourite pick of the 5 division. It includes Denny's, who was obviously very good.
Very good, but could be better. Let's be fair. Let's be really hard for that. The poor Chinese boy. Okay. I think that wraps up the painting part of this podcast. So thanks, Jay, for joining us. It's been an absolute joy to have you on. It's always good to have you in the stream. And you joined our Discord now, so there's no more hiding our crappy paint pictures in our Patreon group. Like they're all out there for the world to see, and especially Jay. So thanks for joining in. For everyone watching, and for everyone watching this later on, Jay is our painting sponsor for our Super Major in November. We're very close to the 200 tickets, so we're really hoping that we can break those 200 numbers really quickly. Because then we're going to go into the Super Major territory. Something Jay doesn't know yet, but it's going to happen, is that because he's the sponsor of our pin competition, is that for all you guys watching, I think it might be time to head over to Jay's stream at some point in the near future. Because Jay will actually get a ticket for the Super Major to raffle off. Because I know you've been doing a lot of hard work, and it's a small thank you from us to you, because we've been working together for almost a year now. So it felt like an anniversary, so we thought might as well throw in something cool. So we're gonna give a ticket to Jay. I know he already has one of his own, so otherwise we would have given it to him. So it's yours to do with what you want. I know for everyone watching, Jay's Twitch stream is one of the better and more engaging Twitch streams out there if it comes to painting. So make sure to hit him up and join his stream. Give him his thumbs up, his follows, his subs. And then maybe you could win a ticket, or you could just keep it yourself. Of course, you're more than happy to do so. And we're really happy to see you in the flesh again in November.
Dude, I'm looking forward to it so much.
To judge on, like we've all had our Corona paint break, so like the level of painting should be through the roof. So we should have like a really tough job deciding that best in show in November. So at least now you can bring someone along if you want to.
Well, I'm going to have to try and beat last year, which was joint second.
Yeah, that shit can't happen again, man. I think we have to sabotage some dudes from Belgium. I don't know who, but yeah. We'll see if we can make that work. So, Jay, thank you again. I'm going to hit you up for the details for the ticket, and then. But thank you so much for sharing your feedback, your insights with us and with our lovely Patreons, without whom all of this would be really difficult, especially now. So all our patrons, our subs, our followers, thank you so much for standing with us in these difficult times, and for people like Jay, giving us that community support that we all take for granted sometimes, but it's like one of those things that makes this hobby so amazing. So that's it for the painting part. You can hang in there if you want. We're quickly going to go through some previews for our new terrain setup. There's some new products coming out, so we're quickly going to take a look at those, and then we're going to jump over to the game. I believe Martijn is actually currently in his second turn. Playing against Yorks, there was a massive explosion, so there should be a lot of bottles removed by the time we get back over there to the game. So Jay, would you like to give us some closing words, or anything you would like to mention, any people you'd like to shout out, any cool stuff you want to do, any wicked stuff coming on your stream?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me here. It's awesome to see you guys, as always. I think we've had a great friendship over the couple of sort of years that we've known each other, and it's brilliant to be invited to sort of your house, actually, where your stream is, and chat to your viewers. Thank you very much. I've got to go and have a bit of a rest now, because this weekend we're painting up the Scorpec Award and the Judicia in a set of colours that were chosen by the community over on my stream. I'm going to raffle those up over the weekend. The winner will not only win one of those two minis, but they'll also win the rest of the faction that miniature represents, brand new on sprue, new Indomitus. So we got first and second place prize right there. You could win a new character miniature for your army and the start of a new army, all for buying a single raffle ticket for £1. So that's a brilliant prize. Hopefully we'll see you guys twitch.tv/Mohawk Miniatures from 10 AM tomorrow.
Perfect. So thanks, Jay. So everyone that's at home painting, reading the 9th edition rulebook, which of course gets released tonight at midnight. You'll have some great company by joining Jay tomorrow in the stream. Like most weekend streams, it's going to be very draining for Jay and very enjoyable for us to watch him be totally knackered, especially at that like 15-hour mark in the day when you start to break down and all the talking, all the talking degenerates into something that is more akin to like a social club where everyone just hangs out and chills and shares everything they want to talk about.
Last time I airbrushed my Mohawk yellow.
I mean,
because
because
the suggestion it was made. So.
Excellent, man. Thanks again for joining us. I'll definitely be watching, so I'll keep an eye out to the stream. Everyone, make sure to head over to twitch.tv/Mohawk Miniatures to join Jay in the stream this weekend, and of course further on down the road. We're quickly going to go into some train previews. So I'm going to thank Jay for joining us, and then we're quickly going to go into that, wrap that up, and then we're going to go to basically who wore it best. Like we have who wore green the best. We have the Orcs, we have the Dark Angels. I see Stefan doing a little victory dance, so I think the Orcs are currently wearing the green the best.
Have you done all your new
new train stuff? No, I'm going to do that now, but I'm giving a game update because Martijn is touching his hair a lot, so I guess that's generally a bad sign.
No, I'm grab shielding the shit out of it.
He's grab shielding everything.
Grab shielding the shit out of it.
Jay, thanks again. We're quickly gonna hop over to the other gallery, and then we'll be right back and show you the new train stuff, and we'll see you soon. So Jay, thanks again, and we'll talk later, buddy.
Peace out, guys. We'll see you soon. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, man.
Okay, safe.
Oh,